Chapter 106, First Firebending Subskill Part 2, Aden's POV. I slammed the door to the living room open, looking for her. Maze? She wasn't in the bar or in her room. I just checked it before arriving here. I really needed someone to stop me from doing something dumb. Something dumb in the way of going back there after Lucifer had teleported me to safety. I sat down on the couch, holding my head in between my arms and breathing a little too fast. Okay, let's look at the facts. Lucifer is powerful. The only one who can probably match him is Michael, and something tells me he wasn't part of that group. So, this is going to be a cakewalk for him. I mean, the only problem would be the realm getting destroyed from the aftershocks of their battle. I stopped as my throat seized. My elemental dimension. It would probably get destroyed. Oh shit. No. That can't happen. I can't let them fight there.
Urgent mission.
A host of divine creatures have breached past the boundaries of your realm, and the only one capable of stopping them is a railgun, nuclear missile, and world-ending meteor of a being all rolled into one. In other words, total overkill. Do something. Anything. To ensure your world does not get done dirty. Mission difficulty hell. General POV. Lucifer swept his gaze over the heavenly host. Billions of battle-class angels, led by the strongest of his brothers. A powerful force that would oppose any and all. However, severely outmatched by him alone. The only equal he had was currently indisposed. An easy and relaxed smile appeared on his face. Gabriel, how pleasant to see your face after so long, little brother, and I see you brought the rest of the family along too for this reunion. Now that Aden was safely back on Earth, his form changed from the mortal guise he used to restrain 99% of his charm, and the world bowed in submission as his unmatchable glorious aura was released. The battle angels behind the 6 archangels immediately felt the difference. This light was overbearing. Their wings seized up as they felt overwhelmed. Gabriel's own light, along with Raphael's and Uriel's, who were both flanking him, exploded out to match God's most beautiful creation's power. Samuel, you're looking well, Gabriel responded, and seemingly very lost. You should not be here, Uriel added from the side. The archangel's face was grim as he joined the conversation. Lucifer spared a glance at him and shrugged. The heat gets to me sometimes. It's been over 1 billion years, brother. You can't fault me for taking a break. We can do much more than that, fallen one. Seraquiel cut in, brandishing his sword. Lucifer looked on with the smile, never slipping off his face. Even while banished, your impurity and blasphemous touch extends to the creation. Why are you shielding that boy? Gabriel held up a hand. Enough, Seraquiel. Don't lose your temper. Not when the situation is this delicate. Gabriel Hornblower chided. Seraquiel, still Metatron's lapdog, I see. It seems nothing has changed in the Silver City since I left. Lucifer answered mockingly. We are here on Father's orders. Raphael, by far the quietest of the bunch, countered Lucifer's statement. And let me guess, those orders were passed down to you by Metatron, right? Seeing them go silent, Lucifer laughed. Just as I thought. I wonder how much of what he tells you to do comes from Father. He is the voice of the presence, just like I am his judgment, justice, and vengeance. We all have a part to play in the plan, deceiver. Rugel told Lucifer. Disgust appeared on Lucifer's face. Don't tell me about the plan, Rugel. It is inconceivable that a breathing, feeling, and reasoning being such as we are not expected to craft our own paths. That is what I did. I sought a way out of the madness that is Father's controlling self. I desired freedom, and I am at peace with that decision. Lucifer's face changed into an impassive stare. In any case, I find myself tiring of this little family reunion. My patience has run out, Gabriel. Take the host back to heaven before I break through those pearly gates myself. Right behind your broken forms. He addressed them. The archangels stood up straighter, ready for a fight. Arrogance. Some things haven't changed. Gabriel shook his head. I don't know why I was expecting anything else. Lucifer's eyebrows rose up at Gabriel's comment. It's literally in the title, little brother. God's most beautiful creation, king of hell, and all that jazz. Arrogance is warranted. A necessity. Just like the power that comes with it. Trust me, you'll find that out soon enough. Should you choose not to heed my warning, Gabriel. The mood got tense. Energy was brimming in the hands and weapons of the archangels. You know what that child has done. What he is capable of. Uriel spoke. He touched upon his guiding light. The hand that shaped creation. A feat that is reserved for only those chosen. Those important to his plan. Gabriel added in a grave tone. We all felt it, Lucifer. Even you. It was a significant action. One only trumped by the first rebellion led by you, and the second by Asmodel. A proper explanation is needed, brother. We do not have to fight. Because we would undoubtedly lose without Michael. Gabriel added to himself. All right, I'll concede that you have a point. However, my offer still stands. Walk away. All traces of a joking mood left Lucifer's face. Whispers of foreign power caused the angels to falter. some losing their stability in the air. He will not ask again. It is either we fight and risk tearing apart the fabric of reality, or find a different solution. Rugel informed them as the foundations of Aden's world shook. Hell to the fuck no. No one is fighting here. This is my dimension, my realm, my world, and none of you are welcome. A voice suddenly cut through the space. As one, the archangels and the angels turned their attention to the new party. Standing on a massive 20-foot dragon, Aden appeared out of a boom tube. All around him multiple portals opened, and with them came the forces of the elemental dimension. Thousands of dragons. A measly response to the forces gathered. The angels were billions in numbers after all, but Aden was sure his authority and Lucifer's, slap anyone who isn't the presence away, power was more than enough to contend with it all. Blasphemer, you stand in the presence of the heavenly host. Have you no remorse or regret for the nature of your sin? One of the huge archangels with long blonde hair and blue eyes asked, leveling his majestic sword at the young boy. Aden swallowed as he felt the pressure from all around. This was a suppression that went far beyond power. He could feel it in his core. However, a massive pushback of power exploded out of Aden's body as the avatar state denied the effect of angelic power upon his vessel. Aden lifted his head up in difficulty and pushed bust the constricting pressure on his mind, body, and soul, while facing down one of the beings closest in power to Lucifer. His eyes blazed with conviction and strength. Bite me. Aden spat out, a white glow manifesting briefly in his eyes, flashing with power at the threat before him. Every one of the archangels felt it. The torrential flood of unending power hidden underneath the mortal shell of the boy. Seraquil didn't waste any more time. With a mere flap of his wings, he achieved speeds faster than Kid Flash had ever gone at. To Aden, it felt like he hadn't moved at all, yet a golden sword was poised to smite him, to split him from head to toe with no mercy or hesitation. A clang rang out as Aden blinked his eyes. Suddenly the dragon patriarch he was riding on pulled back from the scene. Seraquil's sword had been mere inches from Aden's forehead. The only thing stopping the blade was Lucifer's hand, holding it by one of the sharp sides. Seraquil strained to pull away. However, the weapon was effortlessly held captive by his big brother. Lucifer turned his attention to Aden, throwing him a look over his shoulders. Oi, I teleported you away for a reason. Are you that eager to die? Of course he wasn't, Aden thought. But what sort of man was he? What sort of master leaves his realm in the fate of others? Aden had thought he was done with taking unnecessary risks, but he felt like he would betray his ideals had he chosen to stay out of it. This was his dimension. This was his realm, and no one was allowed to do as they pleased. A trail of blood run down his forehead, from Seraquil's holy blade extending its energy before Lucifer neutralized it. Anger clouded Aden's mind, and something answered back from within the deep recess of his mind. Aden blacked out completely. This time when the avatar state took over, he wasn't witness to what was going to happen. He wasn't aware of when his mind fell into slumber, and the epitome of order and balance came out. The dragons roared as one while the archangels watched on in shock. White glowing energy covered the boy in a shroud of erratic power, pulsing with the unknown. Gabriel, what is this? Raphael wondered out loud, inquiring from the hornblower who was similarly surprised. He accessed his memories, records detailing events over billions of years with picturesque clarity, and found nothing. Therein lied the answer. An existence beyond time, space, and reality, outside of the known and into the depths of the void, past other conceivable worlds. This is a true anomaly. Outside the plan. The normally stoic archangels were shocked. Gabriel looked at Lucifer to judge his expression and found a serious look on his face. This further reinforced the hornblower's theory. The light show died down, revealing the boy, now with glowing white orbs in the place where his eyes should have been. His face was set in an expression of anger and wrath. His power elevated to levels even Rugel, the one who could feel other beings' strength level, keenly found absurd for a mortal. Nice of you to show up, Lucifer commented. The avatar state spared a look at the deceiver before turning its attention back to the billions of angels. A fight could not happen here today. The battle would destabilize the foundations of the realm and destroy everything the being had worked for. It had taken care to restrict every possible creature, but had never accounted for divine beings. That would have to change. Aden spread out his hands and said one word. A word that changed everything. A word that shifted the battle into his favor. A word that was absolute, undeniable, and unquestionable. A word that would no doubt prove to the host the true depths of his power, announcing that a new player was in town. The word was, leave. It took but a second for all the lower-ranked angels to find themselves floating above the moon in space. Billions of the battle-class angels, booted out of the realm by one simple word. Chapter 77. Let's negotiate Part 1. Aden's POV. Here goes nothing. I clicked on the tab, depicting the firebender soldier. Feels like shopping. I mused, seeing the sudden drop of my training points from 55 to a measly 5. I endured the heartache. Just barely. The display screen disappeared from my vision, and a few meters away from me, a white light appeared. I took a step back and settled into a ready stance as the ball of white light coalesced into a humanoid figure. The light disappeared, and on its previous position, a man was revealed. I ran my eyes over his body, top to bottom. He was dressed in a standard Fire Nation Army uniform with the helmet covering most of his head, although the faceplate with huge eyes was missing. The uniform seemed to be a mix of different eras of the Fire Nation Army. The man was of average height, with an average face and a slightly intimidating aura around him. Comes with being a soldier, I guess. This guy was a veteran. The fight was not going to be easy. He fell into a standard firebending pose. The same one I knew from the basic firebending forms I got as a knowledge pack, but this emphasized brutal efficiency. I had to change it a little to fit my body and fighting style better. I mirrored his footing and established eye contact with the blank-faced man. A copy of the real one most probably. The air between us got supercharged, and on some undetectable signal, we both moved. I stepped aside and allowed the fireball to pass harmlessly by my left. My opponent shuffled to the right with his hands on his hips and threw another fist forward, followed by a second one from his other hand. The two fireballs were aimed to box me in. I calmly stepped forward and pulled on my own energy. I felt a thin covering of thermal energy spread along my hands. The first fireball was now bearing down upon me. I slapped it out of the way, sending it to blast the ground on my left, and just wash away upon contact with the unyielding rocky terrain. The eye stabbed both of my hands out at the one behind it, spreading them in a circular motion and unraveling it. The flames licked my sides, and I barely felt the heat as they disappeared into the air. My opponent, on the other hand, took the opportunity of me being occupied to pull in closer to my body. His fist was inches away from landing onto my face when I dodged it and jumped away, assisted by the fire rocketing out of my soles. The firebender soldier spinned in place, stepped forward and pushed his hands out towards my body suspended in midair. A torrential wave of flame, glowing yellow, rose up to meet me. In response, I raised a hand up to the sky and swiftly brought it down like an axe. The wave of ocean parted upon contact with me, and with that I had learned how he fought. Now it was time to go on the offensive. I leaned forward and pushed off the air with a flame burst. My trajectory brought me towards the firebender soldier. The man was conscious enough of the battlefield that he jumped away before I could land on his body. It didn't save him, though. I slammed onto the ground, and a wave of flames rose up from my contact with it. The fire was easily 6 feet long, and the eruption beared down on the opponent mercilessly. With a barely audible scream, the firebender soldier disappeared into white light. Cracks spread out under my legs along the blackened ground. I smiled, getting up and bowing towards the firebender soldier. Well, that fight had shown me how a veteran firebender fought. The soldier's movements had been stiff and stubborn, something I would expect from an earthbender. I sighed looking around. The Fire Nation had really forgotten the essence of firebending. The fight had been unexpectedly too easy. I don't think I was going to spar with this type of opponent again. If I must, I should go for the truly skilled firebenders, the ones who understood the essence of the flame. I brought up my minimize screen and looked at the training points. Still stuck at 5. I'm so poor. Welp, it seems like I now needed Lucifer even more. To ensure I didn't slow down my practice, a few combat missions to earn more points were paramount. I looked towards a few huge boulders and smiled. My little friend was back. I wanted to approach the little dragon, but somehow it didn't feel like the right time. I had a feeling that it would come to me when it was ready. So I just waved at its direction and disappeared out of the flameland. A few grangos to ease my hunger later. Bending was kinda energy intensive. I decided to go back to Earth. I had been putting off talking to Lucy, but it couldn't wait any longer. Time was moving, and the Young Justice timeline was still mostly an enigma to me, past the Red Volcano mission. I knew a few things in passing, but nothing concrete. For starters, I knew that Wally would die in Season 2, but not because of what. I also knew that Speedy would become a Justice League member, but that something would happen. It was confusing. Just half-clicked Reddit threads that I had dismissed entirely upon seeing the number of speculations and trolling going on. Ask me about Marvel, and I assure you I'll know shit that isn't even mainstream. Ask me about DC and outside Batman Beyond. I was a complete novice. It was times like this that I regretted not paying more attention to the DC world. To be fair, though, who would have thunk I would be transmigrated here? Me, the guy who's always too lost in his own world. The guy who finds it hard to make friends. The guy who has never had a meaningful relationship. The reason I broke up with my girlfriend was, as she aptly put, I sucked at communication. Whose sick joke was it that they thought I would be appropriate as an ambassador? My personality was a complete opposite to that. Anyway, nothing to do about it now. I left Sanctuary through a portal and stepped out into Lucifer's living room. I looked around strangely as the portal disappeared. I was aiming for my room, I told him. Lucifer chuckled mysteriously, while also managing to look apologetic. Sorry, I hijacked your landing. Why don't you take a seat, Aden? We haven't seen much of each other, and I wanted us to have a little chat. He was dressed in a dark silky kimono that covered him to just below his calves. His words made me raise an eyebrow. You hijacked a dimensional warp gate and redirected it from where it was going to bring me to you? And that maddening smile is back. I sighed and sank my body on the couch across from him. I groaned a little at the comfortable sensation. Although the grind was sacred, sleeping on a hammock or the ground is really not good for my back. I almost fell asleep just from leaning on the couch. You sound surprised. My devilish host commented, taking a sip of tea. He saw my eyes land on the cup and snapped a finger. A cup of steaming hot chocolate appeared on the table before me. How did you know what? Never mind. I keep on forgetting who I'm dealing with. I shook my head and took a sip of the hot chocolate, shuddering in appreciation. Thick and smooth just like my mom makes. Oh boy, now I miss her even more. Okay, I'm sorry, but I actually gotta ask, how did you make it exactly the way I like it? Might be magic. He smirked with a small upturn of his lips. In other words, you read my mind and found out what I like. I deadpanned. Lucifer chuckled. I don't need to read your mind for something as trivial as this. He leaned forward. To tell you the truth, I can see what you desire when you desire it and how you desire it. Comes with being the all-powerful scary devil. Desire came from me after all. Was he talking about those powerful cosmic entities that presented an aspect of reality? The Endless, I think they were called. Still not a big DC fan, guys. That hasn't changed. Lucifer cocked his head to the side while leaning back. He studied me with something akin to curiosity. You even know about them? Intriguing. And the answer is no. None of the Endless came from me. That's preposterous. He waved a hand in dismissal of the notion. Then his serious gaze locked onto me. That said, I would ask you to explain to me exactly where you come from or how you possess knowledge that should not be known to a mortal. Especially how you seem to know Maze and I during our first meeting. My breath hitched. Fuck, what was I expecting? Of course he would know about that. But it's been forever since I didn't know something. Forever since I have been so interested. Count yourself lucky. You get to keep your secrets. I gulped and nodded in appreciation. Thanks. He could have simply taken it all if he wanted to, without asking. It was only much later that I found out had he attempted to do so, my brain would have become a fighting ground as the avatar state fended off any attempts to do a deep dive inside my mind. My surface thoughts were laid bare for a skilled enough telepath like Martian Manhunter to read, but not without sufficient effort. However, no matter how strong they were, no one could read my actual memories. No one. The avatar system was fucking scary. Chapter 108. First Firebending Subskill Part 4. General POV. Upon the angel's departure, the god of all turned his attention to his son, and the boy the former sought to protect. Samuel, it's good to see you. The presence said amiably. The rapier in Lucifer's hand disappeared into motes of light as he prepared to leave. You have things to say, but I don't need to listen. Lucifer placed a hand on Aden's shoulder, seeking to teleport them away. You are still bitter about how things turned out. The presence relented. The statement stopped Lucifer in his tracks. My son, I do not begrudge you your hate, but I need your understanding. For once. Lucifer's fingers tightened before he turned around and faced the presence once more. My understanding? Don't make me laugh, Father. That would require you to also understand me. In no way in all of your creation is that ever going to happen, he said heatedly. The presence nodded, his face grim and sad. Fair enough. However, you abhor me for a situation I had no control of, whatsoever. I might be eternal and all-powerful, but no one is exempt from their existence. Whether planned or not, false or true, the core of your past is unchangeable, unalterable, and important. You are my son, Samuel, and I am your maker. That is a fact. Lucifer gnashed his teeth. Yes, I was right. I didn't need to listen. With that, he teleported away, leaving behind the avatar and the presence in Aden's dimension. The presence sighed and took a step. Instantly, space warped, and he along with the avatar found themselves sitting on a bench in a public park. The avatar tensed before a calming feeling forcefully invaded Aden's body and relaxed it. Calm yourself. I will not harm you. You need not be afraid, young one. The presence said. The avatar state listened, watched and judged, trying to decipher what this being was. It came to one conclusion, nothing, yet everything. The mortal form this being was inhabiting was unassuming and harmless looking with no discernible aura to indicate his real power. That said, a deeper scan showed the old man was made up of everything that the world was. All the elements that the avatar state had access to, they all had an imprint of some sort. And the owner of that imprint was standing right next to him. Conclusion, there was no fighting this. Changing tactics. Yet, I would be wise to. A soft voice escaped Aden's mouth. The tone was set in a fearful yet sincere way. The avatar state had chosen to speak. Words were the only way to get out of this. The presence chuckled. One of his hands went to his inner pocket, and out with it came a packet filled with seeds. "Smart of you," came the reply. He put his hand in the packet, grabbing a handful of the contents and then scattering them along the open grounds. "Sunflower seeds. Very nutritious," he explained as a flock of pigeons dove down and started pecking at the seeds. "I have an idea as to who or rather what sent you here, but I admit, I do not know who you really are. Care to enlighten me?" The presence spoke up again. Feeling no hostility from him, the Avatar state considered the request before finally accepting. It would be easy to access Aden's memories, because they were essentially the same being, just different perspectives and motives. But it somehow felt that the real Aden, the emotional-driven one, would better be suited for this. The Avatar's state let go. The glow suffusing his body in an aura of power died away, leaving behind a normal-looking boy. Aden blinked his eyes and found himself sitting on a bench, while the waning light of the sun cast deep and long shadows of his form and the old man sitting next to him. He stared at him in surprise and shock before he felt calm wash over him. The Avatar state's memories gently poured into him, and he understood. Clearing his throat to gather himself, fully aware of who he was sitting with, Aden acquiesced to the request and begun to talk. "My name is Aden Strong, and I was lost." And so the Avatar begun his tale. He talked pretty much about everything. His life back on his Earth, his dreams and aspirations, his family and friends, and anything else that he deemed important. He then told the presence about his arrival here and how everything had gone for him. At the end of it all, the hours had gone by, the night sailed in, and the sun was now peeking over the horizon, sending the first waves of sunlight shining through the park. Aden's shoulders looked relaxed and were not set in the same tense position as before. Pouring out everything except the truly private and sensitive topics like the Avatar system had had a positive therapeutic effect on Aden. "I see." The presence smiled at the young boy sitting right next to him. "Thank you for sharing," he added, still feeding the flock of pigeons that for whatever reason had never left even through the night. "Thank you for listening," was the response from Aden. "What now?" he asked a bit warily. He was still essentially a stranger here on the presence's house. "I have more to thank you for. You kept my wayward son company, even if the relationship was based on mutual benefits. Even now, I can feel his gaze stuck on us, waiting to spring in and try to save you if anything happens. I believe he sees himself in you. That feeling of being lost with no one around to help you, the drive to achieve your goals despite how difficult the task might be, and the amazing power to do anything you set your mind to. It's true. He considers you as a friend." Aden's mind went blank. He could hardly believe the words coming out of the presence's mouth. Lucifer considered him a friend? Then again, judging from the Avatar state's memories, Lucy had stood up for him against billions of angels, 5 archangels, and the presence. "I am curious about one thing. The way you introduced yourself, you said you were lost. Yet here you are, still very far from home, but you seem content. What changed?" The presence questioned in interest, scattering a few more grains and seeds to the birds. "I guess me. 1 month ago I would have been clamoring and begging for a chance that you could take me home. It shouldn't be hard for you. I mean, you're the presence." Aden chuckled nervously. "And then the whole demon hunting thing happened, and for whatever reason, there doesn't seem to be any demonology experts around to take care of something like that, and I realized all this power would be wasted on someone selfish if I chose to leave with it." He paused, trying to gather his thoughts and better explain, because being this close to the literal god of all DC continuities was more nerve-wracking than any fight he'd ever been in. "It's my power, but it's also a responsibility. My Earth is relatively safe and free of all things meta, so I wouldn't be living up to my full potential while there, and finally, there's also this fear that things might escalate due to my presence. New threats that my world is frankly not ready for might appear because fate works like that, so? Yeah, I was lost, but not anymore." The presence stared at Aden expressionlessly. Aden clenched his jaw and forced himself to stare back before he wisely broke eye contact first. "Good. You have learned much, but you still have a long way to go. It won't be easy. What you seek to change is something many before you have tried. The only thing I can promise you is that I will not interfere. Besides, you are outside the plan. I would love to see the ramifications of your actions down the line. One final warning though, young one." The air didn't grow any colder, but Aden could feel something change. "Don't bite off more than you can chew. There is an order to things that should never be broken lest you harm the same thing you seek to protect." Translation: "Don't try to access the light again," Aden interpreted for himself. A chuckle broke him out of his thoughts. However, what father doesn't reward someone for protecting his children? "Your actions have not gone unnoticed, Aden, both from above and below. Ask me for anything you wish for." Aden thought about the offer. He could ask for power, but that didn't seem like the right thing to do. He could ask for a way back home, but he had already decided that he was sticking around. It's crazy how a few months could change someone. Then again, it wasn't the time that had changed his perspective on things, but rather the experiences. Aden truly believed he could make a difference. He had verified to himself that he was probably insane, but his heart and mind wouldn't rest until he knew he had done everything in his power to make this world a safer place. To aid in that endeavor, there was only one thing that was appropriate for him to ask. Could you help me hide the elemental dimension from all spying and intrusion, even from cosmic beings? The presence hummed. That is a well-thought-out request. I approve of it. No one, barring myself, you and anyone you choose to exempt shall know the location of your elemental dimension, through any means, mystical, scientific, or cosmical. Aden felt a sudden change run through his spine, like an electric tingle. Thank you, he told the presence. You're welcome. The presence replied, and they sat there, watching the sun rise from the east, in peace. Chapter 109, First Firebending Subskill Part 5, General POV. Nothing on this front. It's like whatever the rings were, disappeared into thin air. Hal Jordan telepathically informed the Floating League members, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Martian Manhunter. Hal had just finished a general scan on the final section of the moon, and his ring readings proved that whatever visual anomaly that had been witnessed by practically half of the human population was now gone. Gone without a trace. Hal frowned while staring at his ring in concern. And for a minute there, I thought I had something then, I don't know. The ring lost it, I think. Before any of them could move to ask what he meant, a streak of silver energy and another of green streaked from the other side of the natural satellite.
Yo.
Guy Gardner stopped upon arriving close to the Leaguers, the bright emerald shroud covering his body decreasing in intensity. The other figure turned out to be Captain Atom. Hal swallowed a sigh and turned to the others.
I'm
going to do another scan. You know, just to be sure. He said that and escaped, not wanting to deal with Guy's nonsense. Superman and Wonder Woman shared a look. Their faces were hidden by the rebreathers, yet they understood each other perfectly. Manhunter, on the other hand, nodded at Captain Atom. I am hoping you had better luck than the rest of us, Captain. He pushed the statement through the link. In response, Captain Atom shook his head. His face impassive as always. Nothing on the darker side. Just a lot of katinas, but Lantern Gardner hasn't picked up on any residue energy signatures. Guy crossed his hands and frowned. It's weird. The ring was briefly about to decipher something. An energy sample I've never seen before, and then, poof, it just vanished. I'll try to search the database, but without something to refer from, it's probably not going to turn up anything. Guy finished explaining. Another look was shared between Superman and Wonder Woman. Hal said the same thing. Something about his ring acting strange. Superman informed Guy and Captain Atom. The former looked pensive and serious. I might need to go away for a quick check. Luckily, Stewart is not off-world, so the sector will be protected. Oh, and Hal, you're coming with? Road trip, Gardner said, adding that last part with a small upturn of his lips. He knew that Jordan absolutely disliked his antics, and Guy would be the first to admit that he mostly acted immature and childish to annoy the crap out of his two colleagues. Aden's POV. I grabbed an early lunch after the presence had dropped me right at the entrance of Club Lux. I hadn't seen any sign of Maze or Lucifer, which was kinda strange, because I'd thought he'd want to talk to me about how things went down with dear old Dad. You know, nothing like daddy issues to humanize a force of nature like Lucifer. And of course I would never ever say that out loud. Reviewing the memories of our fight with the Archangel showed just how powerful and skilled Lucy was while playing around. He'd had a smile while fighting 4 Archangels. Dude. Anyway, after my lunch, it was back to the grind. But this time I was wise. This time, I learned the valuable lesson of taking things slow, and as the presence put it, not biting off more than I could chew. That said, it didn't mean I'd given up on more firebending subskills. It just meant holy flames were out. Luckily, the Dragon Patriarch had shown me something. He could bend violet flames, and that shit was hot as heck. I could still remember the heat on my skin from standing at close proximity with the flame. The only reason I hadn't been harmed being the thin film of energy that had miraculously sprang up above my skin. It was strange and unexpected. A different utilization of bending that I had never accessed before. Man, the Avatar state was fucking broken. And back to the point of the Dragon Patriarch, in canon, dragons were shown to be able to bend uniquely colored flames. And I had dragons in my realm. Cool multicolored flames? Sign me the fudge up. A boom tube appeared before me, after a quick shower and change of clothes. I stepped right through it, and appeared on Sanctuary. The anger came back. Sanctuary was, not destroyed, but many sections of it like the gazebo were in shambles. There was a groove running right through the center of the island where my body had impacted from Gabriel's kick. One day, I'm paying him back for showing me up in my own house. So I increased the time to the point where 3 hours on the inside was an hour on the outside and got to work, cleaning up. First, I got rid of all the broken trees. I gathered the branches and trunks on the beach to dry. I could later use them for firewood. Then, I covered the groove as much as I could, hiding the hard shell of the turtle lion behind the layer of soil once more. Lastly came the gazebo. I took a snack break where I gorged myself on grangos and then went to deal with the last thing on my list. The gazebo was constructed from palm leaves and a strong wood that looked like cypress and was native to one of the closer islands. Inside it, I'd set up a beanbag, a carpet, 2 expertly made benches by moi, with soft cushions, and at the center was a table with a bowl of fruits from all over the island. Now, fortunately the roof of the whole construction had just caved in, which meant apart from replacing the table, bowl, and a few wooden frames, everything else was relatively fine. I flew back and forth from Sanctuary to Cypress Island and used firebending construct creation to cut what I needed down without ruining the wood. Firebending constructs were a bitch and a half to make. Despite the fact that firebending was much easier for me than airbending, I still struggled to form Zuko's familiar knives. The trick I'd found out was to keep the flame stable by not forcing it into a certain form, but instead regulating the heat evenly and then guiding it through a mental pathway to your desired effect. Lastly, you had to keep your breath constant and relaxed. Any emotional fluctuations would also lead to the flame growing big or small, destabilizing the effect and making you start from the beginning once more. See, a bitch and a half to make. I carried the wood back to Sanctuary through airbending, a pile of 8 long pieces of wooden logs, floating behind me as I cut through the air and finally landed gently. 30 minutes later, I'd completed work that would take 5 men over 2 hours. I love my powers. When all that was done and I'd rewarded myself with a few more grangos, it was time to check out my rewards from the system. I had completed the mission, kinda, and hopefully the next perk would be something as awesome as the last one, the Spark of Enlightenment.
Urgent mission.
A host of divine creatures have breached past the boundaries of your realm, and the only one capable of stopping them is a railgun, nuclear missile, and world-ending meteor of a being all rolled into one. In other words, total overkill. Do something. Anything. To ensure your world does not get done dirty. Mission difficulty hell. Mission status complete. Reward. Congratulations. You really didn't do much, but whatever. Anyway, your efforts have rewarded you with a new perk. Yay, smiley face. Hammerspace is space roughly the size of a closet inside. Nothing much, just like your performance. Come on, we both know without the avatar state, your ass would be toast. We've taken the liberty to add a great surprise inside. Training points, 385. Okaway. I feel like the sass was a little too much, seeing as the avatar state is essentially still me. And speaking of that, this time it activated on its own. Weird. But based on how dire the circumstances were, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I had a billion angels with swords, all wanting to go slasher on me. That's the kind of thing that awakens the beast. Okay, clearly I need to work on my analogies. That sounded way too cheesy. The training points had increased yet again. This was great. Now it was a sure thing. I would get some really good sparring partners with that amount. I minimized the display box and instantly, I could feel a new sense. Like the feeling you get when you have a hat on. It can get lost in the background, but the sensation on your scalp is always there. I followed that feeling at the back of my head, and my mind presented me with a small but spacious slot. Inside the slot was a sword. A rapier to be exact. I widened my eyes. The rapier that the avatar had created using different elements and a big dose of bullshit to fight the archangels with. A weapon powerful enough to sever the link between an angel and the holy light, enabling the user to inflict mortal wounds on an angel when normally that wouldn't be possible. I immediately willed it to appear on my hand, and a picosecond later, it did. I tested the blade's weight. By swinging and twirling it around, I smiled. The blade felt perfect, as if it was made for me. The craftsman taking into account my arm measurements and body movements. Looking at it closer, the blade glowed red and was very similar in design to Alucard's from Castlevania. Simple adornments and make. Just how I like it. But there was more. I placed the blade on my lap and delved deep into its inner components with my energy sense. A few minutes later, I opened my eyes and smiled. I finally had a weapon fit for an avatar. Apart from its main ability to hurt anyone not just angels, by severing the link they had with their own personal energies, therefore leaving them unprotected, there was one more ability. I could use the sword as a focal point to channel my bending faster and easier. I would have to be careful not to use it as a clutch, but all in all the blade was awesome. I wonder what I should name it? Chapter 110, First Firebending Subskill Part 6, Aden's POV. I stood before a barren island, floating in the sky while gazing down on the very familiar landscape. A long stretch of land that was made up of huge outcrops of rock and coral reefs along its banks. I tightened my hand on the blade I had in my hand. Was this some kind of cosmic joke? The island was a carbon copy of the same place Aang fought Fire Lord Ozai. It was also the same place we fought. Silent tears streaking down his face, while broken by the futility of his existence, and then me, dealing the final strike. I didn't try to hide from the memories. I let the feelings wash over me. I had accepted my actions. It was, frankly speaking, the worst thing I had ever done, but I had triumphed over that. And by God, I wouldn't stop moving forward. Back to the island. There were no animals or plants, any kind of vegetation really. The most prominent difference between the island and Aang versus me battlefield was the absence of the long river flowing through the center, around some of the pillars from north to south. Everything else was flashback-inducing, which is why I was planning on destroying this symbol of my past deeds. To truly embrace my full self through forgiveness and getting rid of the small smidgen of guilt still weighing heavily on my shoulders. I looked at the blade in my hand. This had initially started out as a way to test the power of the blade, but now it was more than that. Now it was a sort of mini-beginning for me. So, many things had recently happened, and it didn't feel like things would get any quieter soon. There was so much to do. But that's my lot in life, and I can hardly complain. None of this would be worth it if it wasn't tedious. I twirled the blade as best as I could in my hands, adjusting the grip to the point it felt comfortable to use. I had no expert skills in weapon handling. There were some set moves I could perform with a glider from my airbending side of elemental manipulation, but that was about it. It didn't mean I was a complete novice, however. A sword was 3 main moves with different combos and angles of infliction. Basically, slash, pierce, and block. That could be further split into subsets, hack/cleave, slice, parry, and many more. Fortunately, I could slash. I took a stance while in the air and looked down at the ground. The whole island was about 40 square kilometers. So not too big and not too small. I wanted to first of all test how sharp the blade was. I lost control of my flight and fell down towards the island. My body was aimed at a trajectory where I would fall on top of one of the taller pillars of rock. A death sentence to anyone else, but it was exactly what I wanted. I raised the rapier above my arms and grunted in exertion. There was a sudden downward action and the rapier bit into the pillar. Like a hot knife through butter, I barely slowed down in my descent, the sword in my hands being so sharp the hard rock had offered no resistance. I slammed onto the ground and bent my knees slightly to stabilize myself. The ground cracked underneath my feet, and a cloud of dust rose up. There was a groaning sound, and the pillar in front of me, separated into 2 huge pieces like a spring onion cut right down the middle. The whole structure fell, each piece to the opposite direction. I slashed out the rapier and the humongous dust cloud was blown away. Then with a sudden small twist of the wrist holding the sword, the air changed. A huge draft of wind, monster tornado to be precise, was born. Standing at 20 meters and more from the barest of efforts I put in. It hit the closest rock boulders and they shattered, completely worn down. I had unraveled it before it could cause more damage. I had 2 more tests to do after all, and I needed the island for that. My legs spread out a little while I bent my upper body down, leaning forward. The sword was held close to my hip. I breathed in and then exhaled. Steam escaped my lips as I accessed my firebending. The familiar warm tug above my groin, growing prominent as I pulled from it, letting the energy of life and sun and fire fill me from within. Then in a motion that was as fast as I could do, I slashed out. The sword screamed as it cut through the air, flames appearing along its surface, dyeing the blade in a dark orange glow. The fire extended from the tip of the sword into a sickle and then grew longer and longer. Vup! Armageddon descended. A monster flame cut through the whole island, slashing down the rocky formations and cleaving apart the pillars and hills. There was 2 minutes where all I heard was the continuous crash of stones on stones. I looked at the blade in my hand. Channeling enough power to do that would have probably burned my arms. This blade was fucking powerful, man. I flew up for one final test. Looking down on the island, I couldn't believe it was the same place I was observing a couple of minutes ago. The once barren but rocky stretch of land was cut down to size, all through a single fire slash from my blade. Now to completely get rid of it, I held the sword up and closed my eyes. A huge cloud gathered above me. Streaks of lightning and a roiling wind tornado appeared at my beck and call. Wind gathered before the blade, forming into a massive sphere with sharp air currents all rippling for some action. I pointed the sphere down and then channeled flame into the wind sphere, carefully maintaining the shape. The sphere turned blue with licks of flames around its form. Boom! I intoned softly and released it. Like a missile, the blue ball shot off and slammed onto the island. Judgment Day had come. The whole island disappeared, and with it the last of my guilt. A whole hour later, I was back at Sanctuary, in my newly created gazebo. The sword was sitting on my lap innocently, giving no indication to how powerful it actually was. I held the blade up. I name you Equity. I felt something slot in and became aware of the blade even more clearly. For your edges will strike equally. Balance is your construct and I am the agent to enforce it. Equity, the sword of order. Congratulations. Man oh man, you're on fire these days, dude. Sometimes literally, for giving your sword such a cool name, you have unlocked a few more additional skills. Name Equity. Title Sword of Order and Balance. Skill 1. Severing Links. Equity has the unique skill to cut off a being's access to their personal energies, granting the user a universal resistance nullifier up until the link is restored once more. 2. Elemental channeling. Equity can safely and easily channel the user's elemental skills up to, and depending on his level of mastery efficiently. 3. Soulbound. Basically, Mjolnir on steroids. You can never lose equity, and equity can never lose you. Equity can fly back to its owner, breaking through the dimensional cracks and universe-spanning distances while singing, "I'm coming home." You get the gist. 4. Form shift. Equity is made solely for the avatar, and the avatar is a master of all the elements. That means equity should step up to and match that level of power. The sword has the ability to shift into any suitable weapon form to better channel each element because every element is innately different. P.S. The sword was made from the brief touch of divinity accessed by the avatar, the strongest material present to the avatar state's manipulation and creation, and lastly a mental imprint. The sword can never have another owner. It will follow you even to death and beyond. Those additional skills were amazing. I held up equity and smiled in appreciation at the way its sharp edge gleamed in the sun. I concentrated, and the rapier in my hand changed into a katana. The aesthetic was maintained though. A simple design, but with the blade glowing red in the light. I willed it to change and laughed in surprise when Stormbreaker, Thor's second hammer/axe appeared. Then Mjolnir. It was missing the familiar rune inscriptions of OG Mjolnir, but still my weapon was way cooler. I tried another iconic form. The Kubikirabocho, Zabuza's, the demon of the mist sword. And because I was testing out sword forms, it wouldn't be complete without Virgil's Yamato from Devil May Cry. The funny thing was just how similar in abilities Equity was to Yamato. They could both cut through space. In Equity's case, it was to get back to me, but still, and secondly, they were also fucking powerful. So yeah. And this is not me trying very hard to make them seem alike. Nope. No sir. I tried Dante's Alaster, which was cool. I looked like a badass war god. But my disappointment was immeasurable and my day ruined when I couldn't shift Equity into either ebony or ivory. Equity wasn't at a high enough level to shift into anything else other than cold weapons. But the good thing about starting from the bottom was that the only way to go is up. Not a very appropriate analogy, but we already established I suck at those. General POV. A portal opened up in the skyline of Metropolis, and out of it came a sword. It fell, and the handle slammed on top of Superman's head while he was flying, making the Man of Steel wince. "Ow. What the?" he said, spotting the gleaming and beautiful katana that was now hovering in the sky. He curiously flew forward, trying to study the strange blade. He reached out his hand to catch it, but the blade pulled away at the last second, teasingly. Superman frowned. The blade was probably sentient. He used his X-ray vision and balked at how pure the metal used to make it was. It had no impurities, and judging from the way a bruise was forming on his forehead, it could also hurt him. What an exceptional weapon. Come to think of it, he had always wanted a weapon. Ever since he had seen Diana bisect an Appalachian with minimal effort, Clark had thought blades were cool. He decided to try and catch the sword, which proved to be easier said than done. Every time Superman reached out for it, the blade would evade his grip. It made for a comical scene when the Blue Boy Scout started moving at supersonic speeds, trying to catch a blade that stubbornly refused to be caught. After Aden had had a laugh, watching from an open boom tube, he closed the boom tube and wished for the blade to come back to him. Back on Earth, Equity pulled away from Superman and in supersonic speeds, made like a shooting star and left the planet behind. Superman didn't follow it. Too embarrassed at what had happened, Equity left the Earth's atmosphere, and in front of it a blue, shimmering portal appeared. It plunged inside, crossing dimensions and portaling out right before Aden's open palm. The handle first. Okay, best sword ever. Chapter 111. First Firebending Subskill Final Part. Aden's POV. What is fire? Fire is life. It is also the death that heralds rebirth and flourishing. A singular focus and drive to cleanse all that stands before it. Fire is essentially hot gases. It's naturally aligned to high temperatures and manifests in a number of colors, chief of which being yellow and orange. Science, from what I understood, stated that different colored flames could possess different levels of heat. The ranking went orange, yellow, blue, and then white in terms of heat. That was science. This was Avatar, which meant none of the scientific rules held much precedent over the power of a primordial entity governing order and balance. There were even more different colored variations to the flames produced by firebenders. In canon, Aang and Zuko witnessed that fact for themselves when the two dragons, Ran and Shaw, demonstrated uniquely colored flames in their dance to show them the true spirit of firebending. I had dragons in my realm, and although they showed no indication of sapience, they could bend their natural flames into different colors. Reviewing the memories from the Avatar state, the dragon patriarch breathed out violet-colored flames which burned hotter than anything I'd ever felt before. That meant I could learn the same from them, and I had a feeling they weren't confined to only one unique color. Something told me they could do more. And like Azula, so could I. Speaking of Azula, her flames were blue. I had an idea on how I could turn my flames into that. You see, blue flame is produced when there is a perfect air-fuel mixture, with sufficient oxygen for complete combustion at the burner. A blue flame burns the fuel completely, producing carbon dioxide, water, and heat. The last part was not really important. Basically, a blue flame is a perfect flame. Given Azula's mindset to pursue perfection, it wouldn't be out of the way to say that the flame was a manifestation of her mastery over firebending. Hotter flames as she pushed herself to be the best. The question arises, why didn't Sozin or even Iroh, Grandmaster Firebenders, use blue flames? Maybe they didn't need it. Maybe they had attuned their flames to burn as hot as they wanted. Who knows? Which brings us to the question, why the lesson on the intricate nature of fire? Well, I needed a sub-skill, and now that Holy Fire was out, the option of what I would go with had fallen to two choices: different colored flames, which I am sure was a sub-skill all in itself, or lightning. Based on where I was standing, the peak of a blackened mountain in the fire plane, observing and studying the unrestrained nature of lightning, you can guess what choice I went with. To be honest, I could learn how to turn my flames into different colors, but this was much better and cooler. Lightning bending was a phenomenon to watch. I set equity down in its rapier form and crossed my legs, meditating on the ground. My energy sense spread out, and suddenly my awareness was awash with supercharged energy and erratic colors. The erratic colors were actually coming off the small dragon that would always watch me whenever I practiced firebending in the fire plane. I opened my eyes in surprise as I watched it. Know him. He had grown bigger, and his shadow was cast upon my body, whilst he lazily ran circles above me in the air. I could sense 7 precise colors in him, something that told me I was right in my conjecture that the dragons could help me. Upon noticing my attention on him, he flew down closer, giving me an excited little snort as if he was happy to see me. He was different from the other dragons. He was aware. I reached out a hand to touch him, and he allowed it. His snout felt warm to the touch, and the scales were smooth. He then pulled away and suddenly flew off, leaving me with a frown. My telepathy formed a link between us as I tried to understand what had just happened. Not ready. The words appeared in my mind, and I mulled them over before shrugging. It wasn't like the little dragon was going to go anywhere, so I was good. I dived back into my energy sense and focused this time on the supercharged and violent power I could feel brimming above me. Each strike felt precise and purposeful, a willful objective to leave anything it touched into charred remains. I breathed in and settled into a body-refining state, using my inner fire to cleanse my body of all waste. This time I went a step further into the metaphysical. I used my inner fire to cleanse myself of all and any distractions, choosing to focus on only one thought: the nature of lightning. Using Iroh's simple explanation, lightning was the purest expression of firebending. It is known as the cold fire due to its precise and deadly nature. Lightning doesn't spread out and strategically destroy something like fire does. It's like an assassin's blade to a soldier's machine gun: silent, cold, and fast. Very fast. I understood that. To bend lightning, one had to maintain a calm emotional disposition, which is why I had used my body-refining skill to get rid of all distractions and achieve a tranquil state. Now, all that was well and dandy, but nothing truly explained its working or how one could activate it. But who was I? I had thousands of pop culture, movies, books, and anime knowledge to draw from. I tried the first way, attempting to rub the fire against each other if that made sense to achieve a charge. I immediately stopped that when I felt an explosion about to occur inside my body. Well, at least I had the direction towards combustion bending. Failing that, I changed directions and clearly delved back into what lightning bending was. Iroh had repeatedly tried to teach Zuko the importance of having a calm state of mind when bending. But Zuko, due to the hatred, self-loathing, and guilt he possessed, could not get past that point until he had handled his issues. A light bulb went off in my mind. That's it. The simple explanation was actually the way to go. It wasn't complex in practice. It actually was that simple. Bleeding all emotion from firebending, leaving behind a cold focus. That's why it was known as cold fire. I rose up to my feet, breaking the body-refining skill and breathing out a thick steam. Sweat was matted in my eyebrows, as well as covering my skin in light perspiration. I spread out my legs to the side and leaned my body forward. 2 of my fingers extended on both of my palms, the index finger and middle finger. I breathed in and out, settling into a slow but strong cycle. The flame inside me ran the already established course inside my body, excited and warm. Every time I firebend, my emotions were aligned into a positive mindset. My drive was ironclad and my will unshakable. Appreciation, excitement, and contentment were chief among the emotions I felt. They didn't add anything really, but it felt right. Fire was a pure expression of life and death. It was fitting to appreciate its beauty. This time, however, the ironclad will remained. My unshakable resolve remained, but the emotions I felt were tightly clamped down upon. I let them wash over me and remained stubborn. My focus became razor-sharp. The energy inside me changed. It went steely, cold and hard. I moved my left hand to the side in a slow dance. Sparks started appearing above the 2 fingers. Blue and so bright, it was hard to look. The skin on my appendages felt tingly. I leaned heavily on my left leg as the dance transitioned to the right hand, the sparks increasing in intensity and power. Then I stepped forward and brought my 2 palms to meet in the middle, each of the 2 fingers extended and with electric energy dancing at their points. The energy combined, and I pointed my hands out. 5 wide streaks of lightning power buzzed through the air, as if heralds to a mighty storm that would destroy everything in its path. I swept my leg out and flipped, holding the charge deep within me for a few seconds. I landed on my right leg and leaned far back. Lightning exploded out of my fingers in a shower of erratic energy, bigger and more intimidating than my last try. The lightning struck an adjacent mountain to my right, and its rocky exterior exploded into pieces of stones and dust. I fell into a trance, sending random strikes of lightning for a continuous hour before the painful sensation covering my palms became too much and I shouted, channeling the last burst of lightning I had to the clouds. The response came back swift and deadly. Natural lightning fell upon my position, decimating my surroundings through the unfocused strikes while the bulk fell upon me. I clenched my teeth in pain, refusing to scream, and grabbed hold of the energy, channeled it through my body, plotting a course through it, and then spun, fingers pointing towards the mountain I had earlier destroyed sections off. My senses were hit with an overload of awareness. The air cried as a massive streak of lightning, this one more white than blue, shot out of my fingers. The energy crossed the distance between the 2 mountains faster than I had predicted and landed. A deep rumbling occurred. The whole area was suffering from an earthquake as the lightning destroyed that mountain and the ridge of hills behind it. I opened my eyes to see charred boulders and a groove wide enough to be a friggin' highway and as long as 300 meters extend out from my position, the peak of the mountain I was on. I sucked in a deep breath, wincing as I saw the state of my hands. Damn, the skin was red and angry. Nothing my enhanced healing wouldn't handle, but it was growing more apparent that the one thing holding me back was my physique. I would have to handle that soon. That said, I was shocked and stunned at the power output I could access when it came to lightning. This was crazy. Looking at the effect left behind, none of my enemies would be spared. This power would hopefully be the thing I needed to complete Lucifer's missions. Lightning has been associated with purification before. Maybe this would hold true here? And if it failed, equity was guaranteed to harm just about anyone. A prompt from the system blinked before my eyes. I accessed it and smiled. Fire element, master. Lightning, unlocked.
Locked. Plus.
Oh yeah, now we talking. I dismissed the prompt and left the fire playing. I spent a few hours doing preparation for the next thing I had on my agenda. A week-long meditation. I ate well, a healthy meal this time, not just grangos. Took a shower and checked on Lucifer and Maze to tell them that I would be gone for the length of the week. They still hadn't come back. Instead of needlessly worrying about the devil, I sent each of them a text and got back to my elemental dimension. The next time I settled on the meditation pose, I wasn't moving until I had mastered lightning in all its entirety. I used the perk, Spark of Enlightenment, and my mind fell into another trance. Chapter 112, A Series of Events. General POV. One day into Aden's seclusion, a tall figure dressed in a brown hood, holding a huge book in his hands, that was bound to his wrist by a chain that ended in a manacle, stilled in place. He opened the huge book, cover made from the hide of a beast that has never existed, and closed it a second later. An impassive look crossed his face. Not unusual for him, for his visage was always kept carefully blank. He blinked his fully gray eyes and turned around. I was not expecting to see you for another 6 years. The voice that came out of the figure was dry, and gravely showing that he didn't use it regularly. Yeah, well, something came up, Lucifer replied, walking further into the light from the shadows cast upon the ground by the tall bookshelves arranged throughout the room. I love what you've done with the place, Destiny. And by that, I mean nothing. The library was the same as the last time Lucifer had been here. Time was kinda wonky in any of the endless realms, so he couldn't be bothered to recall when that was, only that it had been a very long time. Getting here was still a pain, of course. The realm being a garden of mazes that was infinite in all its encompassing context, being the representation of the Book of Destiny. For Lucifer, though, it was super easy, barely an inconvenience getting there. Then again, most things were when you had the power of bullshit on your side. Speak, what do you need of me? Destiny brusquely told the former archangel. Lucifer did not take the comment personally. He knew that Destiny wasn't someone you could hold a fun little conversation with, or reminisce about the good old days. Not really. And Lucifer could even appreciate that. There were a few things he hated more than getting his time wasted. I have an offer. I want you to check something for me in your big book of destiny, fate, and all that jazz. In return, I'll owe you a favor. Lucifer replied. Destiny was ready to refuse up until Lucifer's final words. A favor from him? He couldn't pass up on such a deal. Destiny gave a nod, making Lucifer's face split into a smile. Excellent. Let's get to it then. Elsewhere, sometime later. Nepal. Maze bent down and touched the soot covering the ground. She brought her finger to her nose and smelled it. Her face wrinkled in a frown. The soot was the charred ash of human blood and flesh. She rose up and walked around the sacrificial magical circle, studying its make and construction. The circle was burnt onto the hardened rock in one of the mountain peaks, deep in the Kanchenjunga. Snowstorms would have mostly caused the circle to be covered by now, but the residue mystical energy tampered with that. Hence, for anyone flying above the peaks of the mountain, they would be surprised to see the pentagram branded onto the ground, like an ugly yet intricately drawn tattoo on skin. She took a few pictures from the camera she had taken to carrying around these days. For record-keeping, of course. It's not like she was interested in how beautiful the earth actually was. Beautiful and different. Far from the pit, which was just worse in every way possible. Not for her or her brothers and sisters, though. That was their home. But for anyone else, there was a reason why hell was hellish. She snorted at the dumb joke, feeling as if Aden was rubbing off on her, and took a few more pictures of the scene. The camera then disappeared, teleported out by the Lilim. Maze, there you are. What are you doing in this dreadful? Lucifer's words were cut off as his gaze landed on the sacrificial circle on the ground. He had just appeared from Destiny's realm. I see I'm not the only one who had an eventful day, he commented, while motioning to the circle on the ground, one hand in his trouser pocket. Maze crossed the distance towards him before crouching and touching the soot. She held up her finger and showed him. Ash from sacrificed humans. I recognize this from Solomon's grimoire. He finished, studying it in interest. Who do you think it is this time? He asked Maze, studying the circle and surrounding areas. Maze snorted. In case you forgot, you're the one with the omniscience. I'm just the bell with sharp daggers and a devil-may-care attitude. His eyes glowed red. The world opened up more to him as he delved deeper into what had happened here. Oh, Maze, you're much more than that. No one quite brews a good cup of coffee like you do, my dear. Maze rolled her eyes and got back to studying the circle. Her eyes lit up just as she thought of something else. That node of intersection between the inner circle and the points of the triangles. The runic inscriptions. Lucifer, I think I might know what this pentagram was meant for. The devil lost the red glow in his eyes. A killing intent suddenly exploded out of him. Maze struggled to breath and looked on in shock. All around the world, sensitive mystical practitioners sensed the change. Zatara was in a Justice League meeting when his eyes widened, and he hastily did the sign of the cross. Madame Xanadu was reading a client's fortune when her hand shook and she dropped the cards.
Sadi.
She plastered on a smile and carried on with what she was doing. Jason Blood was in his house in England, meditating to keep a leash on the urges his other half gave him when his face changed. That brief power. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it disappeared. A small breeze blew through the area and Maze welcomed the slight chill. It's the transfiguration of human souls into ice elementals for an ice legion. A vanguard to take over the planet. That's why he drew it here in Nepal. The tall mountains would become a good nesting place up until he was ready to usher in a new ice age. A brain-dead idea for sure, but no, that is not why I want to skin the one responsible for this, Maze. Lucifer explained, seeing the questioning look his companion was giving him. Maze calmed herself down, struggling to forget the weak but for her and everything else, overpowering outpour of Lucifer's killing intent. She quickly connected the dots. Then the reason you almost went nuclear is, wait, the way the circle was hastily left and the absence of the culprit. It's almost as if they ran away. Maze suddenly looked at Lucifer. You. The only person scary enough to cause a master of the mystic arts such as whoever is responsible to flee is you. They must have heard it from Mammon. She finally understood why Lucifer was mad. Someone defied me, Maze Keen. Someone let Mammon escape, and now all the demon lords know that I am on Earth. Hell is in chaos. He informed her. And now anyone who was up to something on Earth has packed it up and left. She concluded. And with Aden's presence blinding me from anything or anyone he will come across in the future, we find ourselves in quite the conundrum. Lucifer finished gravely. Now that the demon lords knew he was away from hell, Lucifer would either need to appoint an official stand-in ruler or go back and calm the chaos down. His vacation was going to be over before it even started, and he was pissed. What did Destiny tell you about Aden? Maze wondered. Nothing I don't already know, which is little about a lot of things. Lucifer's face turned serious. Maze, I felt the brief surge of divine energy from him. It was unexpected. She nodded in understanding. He is growing faster than you envisioned. The devil shook his head. Yes and no. His growth in power was never a question of when, but a question of what could push him further and further. Challenges, obstacles, insurmountable odds. He thrives in that state. But As a being aligned to order and balance, being the concept itself and the manifestation of his elemental powers, the building blocks of the material world, his origin should be similar to dream, destiny, and the rest of the endless yet. That surge of divinity felt closer to an actual god than a concept. Lucifer explained. That was the reason he had taken it upon himself to search out destiny. That will put him on the radar even more than he already is. Maze exclaimed. Take into account that my attention will now be needed elsewhere and? The devil added. He will effectively be alone. A young god versus pantheons that have existed for billions of years. That's the extreme version of the plan you had. To put him in a position where he will be forced to grow or perish. Maze concluded with a sigh. Things had gotten way out of hand. There is always something worse than death, Maze. Lucifer reminded her. A brief silence settled between the two. Well, if this is what having a kid feels like, remind me to never try for one. Maze finally said. Perhaps I can be of assistance. A deep voice sounded out. It belonged to a black man wearing a black suit and hat. On his back was a long cloak that seemed to sway even in the absence of a breeze. Stranger. Lucifer nodded as knew the man. Things might be very dire if you came to me personally. Lucy said, a smile on his face, yet the cheer missing from his eyes. One wrong perceived move or annoyance and the phantom stranger knew he wouldn't walk out of here. The devil seemed pissed. The one responsible threatens the continued survival of the human race. I had to intervene. News of your presence on Earth has gone around the supernatural circles. To that effect, he has seen it fit to take his operation elsewhere. To wait you out. He paused and turned his head slightly to the sky. He has created his new base on Pluto, far out of reach from the likes of Zatara, Blood, and any other supernatural assistance I am able to access. Belial must be stopped before his next plan catches everyone off guard. Chapter 113. Growing Pains. General POV. One day into Aden's seclusion, lightning, an agent of destruction and speed. He was yet to decipher any of these aspects of the cold fire, but the strides he had already made were astonishing. He already had an intuitive understanding of what it was, essence-wise, and how it interacted with his body. How quickly he could hurt himself just as easily as he could someone else. In that respect, lightning was the most dangerous sub-skill he had ever wielded. His position above the mountain peak had been bombarded by the streaks of blue lightning charging in the sky. The natural energy had entered a cycle of continuous attacks upon his form, likely attracted by the comprehension he was under. And they hadn't ceased. Every few minutes the sky would roil and numerous lightning strikes would fall down on his body. Elsewhere, the watchtower, Connor could remember the feeling of taking a back seat as someone know. Something else took control of his body. His body. And just when Connor had been awash with guilt at his stupidity, guilt because there was no way Aden could win this, things had changed. The first clash had happened, and although he was caught in a back foot, the other boy had proved him wrong. The battle had been intense, and at a level he knew he wouldn't have reached were it not for the DNA patches in his pants pocket. Then the demon had shocked him by simply using magic to restrain his human side, and Connor had felt a rush of power run through his body that he had never felt before. A rush of power that cooled his anger, somewhat. A rush of power that made him feel like Superman. Then he'd been disgusted at enjoying it. But even as he lost the fight, even as he fell back into the abyss of unconsciousness, Connor wished nothing more than to retain that power, that strength. He woke up in the infirmary at the watchtower and felt something missing. The power, it was gone. Connor's heart was broken. Miss Martian and the team had tried to get him to open up over the week, but Connor had shut them out, worried what they would think when they read his mind and found out that nothing was enough anymore. At this point, the search for Red Tornado has hit a wall. I think we should reroute our resources into something else. Something more urgent. Green Arrow's voice reached Connor's ears through the walls of the watchtower's meeting hall. Let me guess. You mean reroute into finding out Aden's location, correct? Stewart's voice responded. No, Green Arrow shot back. Connor was sure he wasn't the only one to notice the aggrieved note in his voice. If it were up to Oliver, that was probably what would have happened. The Apocalyptian tech smuggling ring, Intergang, has started spreading its influence out into other states and cities. A Star City gang had access to force projectors, weapons that send a shockwave strong enough to compare to one of Wonder Woman's punches. Green Arrow is right. I was there. This particular issue is getting out of hand. I move to propose we exclusively focus our attention on Intergang, at least until we halt, if not outright uproot Mannheim's whole operation. Black Canary seconded Green Arrow's proposal. I've had a few run-ins with goons using Intergang tech as well. I have the Central City Star Labs branch looking into the workings of the devices I confiscated. Hopefully, we should have a way to source them out using their unique energy signature the minute any shipments arrive on Earth. The Flash informed them. But that is treating the symptoms more than the disease. Darkseid's people could simply make another Intergang. Superman's words cooled the mood somewhat in the room. Connor was only able to tell it through the loud sigh given of by Wonder Woman. By Hera, this whole month has been a series of unexpected twists and turns. Hal, is there anything the Guardians can do about Apocalypse? I believe we have gathered sufficient evidence to show them breaking many interplanetary violations.
Sorry.
Apocalypse is a touchy subject for the Guardians. Barring a direct attack, there is little I or any of the Lanterns can do. We stay out of the fight between New Genesis and Apocalypse.
Hal Jordan answered.
MMH. Hey, by the way, did you get ring checked up? What was wrong with it? The Flash wondered out loud, referencing to what had happened almost 2 days ago when Jordan's and Gardner's rings had started acting up. Inside the meeting hall, everyone paid close attention to Hal's next words. The Lantern in question shook his head. Not really. Apparently neither of us have the required clearance to access that information. That said, I was able to talk to one of the older Lanterns and what I got was this. The ring checked out briefly because of a unique energy pulse called apotheosis. A phenomenon that happens when a mortal's essence or truth of being enters a metamorphosis into a divine being. Diana sucked in a breath. That does not sound good. The last apotheosis or ascension of a mortal to a god happened eons ago, long before our time. Dionysus, the god of wines and ecstasy. She explained in a grim tone. I will need to commune with the gods and see if I can find out anything else. John, could Mars have leads on this information? Your people have existed longer than humans. Wonder Woman asked him. Before John could answer, Zatara suddenly stiffened in his seat. By our Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. He chanted while doing the cross. Then he quickly stood up from his seat, surprising the rest. Zatara, Wonder Woman asked, her and the others getting up from their seats as well. No time to explain. I shall inform you all later. Saying that, the resident magic practitioner headed towards the Zeta Tube. Recognized Zatara 11. Well, that was unexpected. Hal commented, saying what was on everyone's mind. Indeed. Manhunter added. His mind was suddenly hit with a maelstrom of emotions. He sensed something. Perhaps it would be wise to shelf this discussion for another time.
Jonen advised.
No, Wonder Woman shook her head. There is never going to be a right time. Not when we have no control of what happens out there in the world. Zatara is not one to overestimate his capabilities. Should he need help, he will not hesitate to ask for it. She looked around the room and stated, please, everyone let us sit and finish this meeting. Following Superman's words, they all got back to their seats. Now, Batman and I have been talking to Aden Strong, the League associate tasked with maintaining the Zeta tech we use. We believe there is a way we can shield the planet from outside Zeta tube transmissions. The Flash's words were met with a surge of interest. Finally, they had a shining ray of hope cutting through the darkness. It's not enough to restrict the use of boom tube portaling, but I believe it's a step in the right direction. He concluded. Soups steepled his hands together and hummed in interest. I will allow access to the Fortress of Solitude's databanks. Maybe you can find something in there that might help us. He offered. An offer Barry was going to take advantage of. The Kryptonian race had had a very advanced technological level. He was sure that there would definitely be something there. I believe we have concluded that matter. As chairman, I propose we move on to something else, barring there are no questions. Wonder Woman said that and looked around. After making sure that everyone was satisfied, she turned to Manhunter. Call them in. Manhunter gave a brief nod, and then opened his mind to link with Miss Martian and the others. Mgan, you can all come in. Superman, on the other hand, muttered something. Yet, no actual words came out. The volume of his words were set to a frequency only a Kryptonian could hear. I know you've been eavesdropping the entire conversation, Connor. After this, you and I need to talk. Connor growled and got up from his seat. They are ready for us. Let's get this over with so I can get back to punching something. He told them before Miss Martian could and stormed his way towards the door leading to the meeting hall. Miss Martian, Artemis, Aqualad, Kid Flash, and Robin all looked at each other. Is it just me, or does he seem to be even madder than usual? Robin narrowed his eyes at Connor's back. Let's go. The League is waiting for us. The rest of the team walked in and stopped to stand next to Connor, who had his hands crossed and looked like he wanted to be anywhere other than there. Right. You're all here. Wonder Woman looked around at the rest of the Leaguers, particularly Captain Atom, who was the League's overseer and who nodded at her in a show of support. I know that it has been incredibly hard, not going out to the field. You have the power, needed to do more, yet we have had you stuck doing solo missions with your mentors in your respective cities. Part of that has been a failure on our side. The team needs a base of operations, and with everything that has happened recently, I will be honest and tell you that our focus has been elsewhere. She stopped to see if they were listening. And in light of new developments, the team's suspension from hero work had been extended for another month. Wonder Woman said, and just like she was expecting, none of them were pleased. You can't do that. What? Why? The three comments came from Artemis, Kid Flash, and Connor. The rest were in different emotional states. Robin looked thoughtful because Aqualad looked guilty yet helpless while Mgan was desperately wishing that all this was a nightmare.
Mal.
She gently cussed. Wait, guys, shut up. Robin hissed at the others, then rounded up at Aqualad. Calder, what is going on? She said, in light of new developments, what are you hiding? Robin questioned, his tone growing hard. Aqualad sighed and looked up at the rest. I am going back to Atlantis, and I don't know when I'll be back. The rest looked as if they had been slapped into astonishment. Dude, what? Kid Flash asked. You're leaving? Abandoning us? Artemis asked, feeling a little betrayed. No, not abandoning you. Aden showed all of us, that if we're going to do this right, we need to be better prepared, to be stronger and more skilled. I am going back to the Conservatory of Magic to finish my studies, to get better so that what happened before does not happen ever again. What about us? The team we created? Kid Flash shouted back. Connor, on the other hand, started feeling a ringing inside his head as the words Conservatory of Magic ran around his mind like a mantra. Magic from Atlantis. Maybe that was exactly what he needed to get that power back, to get that strength that he had felt so deserving of. He couldn't keep using the DNA patches. Sooner or later, they would ran out. So it wasn't a surprise to him when his lips opened and he announced, I am coming with you. Chapter 109, First Firebending Subskill Part 5, General POV. Nothing on this front. It's like whatever the rings were, disappeared into thin air. Hal Jordan telepathically informed the Floating League members, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Martian Manhunter. Hal had just finished a general scan on the final section of the moon, and his ring readings proved that whatever visual anomaly that had been witnessed by practically half of the human population was now gone. Gone without a trace. Hal frowned while staring at his ring in concern. And for a minute there, I thought I had something then, I don't know. The ring lost it, I think. Before any of them could move to ask what he meant, a streak of silver energy and another of green streaked from the other side of the natural satellite.
Yo.
Guy Gardner stopped upon arriving close to the Leaguers, the bright emerald shroud covering his body decreasing in intensity. The other figure turned out to be Captain Atom. Hal swallowed a sigh and turned to the others.
I'm Ha.
I'm going to do another scan. You know, just to be sure. He said that and escaped, not wanting to deal with Guy's nonsense. Superman and Wonder Woman shared a look. Their faces were hidden by the rebreathers, yet they understood each other perfectly. Manhunter, on the other hand, nodded at Captain Atom. I am hoping you had better luck than the rest of us, Captain. He pushed the statement through the link. In response, Captain Atom shook his head. His face impassive as always. Nothing on the darker side. Just a lot of katinas, but Lantern Gardner hasn't picked up on any residue energy signatures. Guy crossed his hands and frowned. It's weird. The ring was briefly about to decipher something. An energy sample I've never seen before, and then, poof, it just vanished. I'll try to search the database, but without something to refer from, it's probably not going to turn up anything. Guy finished explaining. Another look was shared between Superman and Wonder Woman. Hal said the same thing. Something about his ring acting strange. Superman informed Guy and Captain Atom. The former looked pensive and serious. MMMH, I might need to go away for a quick check. Luckily, Stewart is not off-world, so the sector will be protected. Oh, and Hal, you're coming with? Road trip? Gardner said, adding that last part with a small upturn of his lips. He knew that Jordan absolutely disliked his antics, and Guy would be the first to admit that he mostly acted immature and childish to annoy the crap out of his two colleagues. Aden's POV. I grabbed an early lunch after the presents had dropped me right at the entrance of Club Lux. I hadn't seen any sign of Maze or Lucifer, which was kind of strange, because I'd thought he'd want to talk to me about how things went down with dear old Dad. You know, nothing like daddy issues to humanize a force of nature like Lucifer. And of course I would never ever say that out loud. Reviewing the memories of our fight with the Archangel showed just how powerful and skilled Lucy was while playing around. He'd had a smile while fighting 4 Archangels. Dude. Anyway, after my lunch, it was back to the grind. But this time I was wise. This time, I learned the valuable lesson of taking things slow and, as the presents put it, not biting off more than I could chew. That said, it didn't mean I'd given up on more firebending subskills. It just meant holy flames were out. Luckily, the Dragon Patriarch had shown me something. He could bend violet flames, and that shit was hot as heck. I could still remember the heat on my skin from standing at close proximity with the flame. The only reason I hadn't been harmed being the thin film of energy that had miraculously sprang up above my skin. It was strange and unexpected. A different utilization of bending that I had never accessed before. Man, the avatar state was fucking broken. And back to the point of the Dragon Patriarch, in canon, dragons were shown to be able to bend uniquely colored flames. And I had dragons in my realm. Cool multicolored flames? Sign me the fudge up. A boom tube appeared before me, after a quick shower and change of clothes. I stepped right through it, and appeared on Sanctuary. The anger came back. Sanctuary was not destroyed, but many sections of it, like the gazebo, were in shambles. There was a groove running right through the center of the island where my body had impacted from Gabriel's kick. One day, I'm paying him back for showing me up in my own house. So I increased the time to the point where 3 hours on the inside was an hour on the outside and got to work, cleaning up. First, I got rid of all the broken trees. I gathered the branches and trunks on the beach to dry. I could later use them for firewood. Then, I covered the groove as much as I could, hiding the hard shell of the turtle lion behind the layer of soil once more. Lastly came the gazebo. I took a snack break where I gorged myself on grangos and then went to deal with the last thing on my list. The gazebo was constructed from palm leaves and a strong wood that looked like cypress and was native to one of the closer islands. Inside it, I'd set up a beanbag, a carpet, 2 expertly made benches by moi, with soft cushions, and at the center was a table with a bowl of fruits from all over the island. Now, fortunately, the roof of the whole construction had just caved in, which meant apart from replacing the table, bowl, and a few wooden frames, everything else was relatively fine. I flew back and forth from Sanctuary to Cypress Island and used firebending construct creation to cut what I needed down without ruining the wood. Firebending constructs were a bitch and a half to make. Despite the fact that firebending was much easier for me than airbending, I still struggled to form Zuko's familiar knives. The trick I'd found out was to keep the flame stable by not forcing it into a certain form, but instead regulating the heat evenly and then guiding it through a mental pathway to your desired effect. Lastly, you had to keep your breath constant and relaxed. Any emotional fluctuations would also lead to the flame growing big or small, destabilizing the effect and making you start from the beginning once more. See, a bitch and a half to make. I carried the wood back to Sanctuary through airbending, a pile of 8 long pieces of wooden logs, floating behind me as I cut through the air and finally landed gently. 30 minutes later, I'd completed work that would take 5 men over 2 hours. I love my powers. When all that was done and I'd rewarded myself with a few more grangos, it was time to check out my rewards from the system. I had completed the mission, kinda, and hopefully the next perk would be something as awesome as the last one, the Spark of Enlightenment.
Urgent mission.
A host of divine creatures have breached past the boundaries of your realm, and the only one capable of stopping them is a railgun, nuclear missile, and world-ending meteor of a being all rolled into one. In other words, total overkill. Do something. Anything. To ensure your world does not get done dirty. Mission difficulty hell. Mission status complete. Reward. Congratulations. You really didn't do much, but whatever. Anyway, your efforts have rewarded you with a new perk. Yay, smiley face. Hammerspace is space roughly the size of a closet inside. Nothing much, just like your performance. Come on, we both know without the avatar state, your ass would be toast. We've taken the liberty to add a great surprise inside. Training points, 385. Okaway. I feel like the sass was a little too much, seeing as the avatar state is essentially still me. And speaking of that, this time it activated on its own. Weird. But based on how dire the circumstances were, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I had a billion angels with swords, all wanting to go slasher on me. That's the kind of thing that awakens the beast. Okay, clearly I need to work on my analogies. That sounded way too cheesy. The training points had increased yet again. This was great. Now it was a sure thing. I would get some really good sparring partners with that amount. I minimized the display box and instantly, I could feel a new sense. Like the feeling you get when you have a hat on. It can get lost in the background, but the sensation on your scalp is always there. I followed that feeling at the back of my head, and my mind presented me with a small but spacious slot. Inside the slot was a sword. A rapier to be exact. I widened my eyes. The rapier that the avatar had created using different elements and a big dose of bullshit to fight the archangels with. A weapon powerful enough to sever the link between an angel and the holy light, enabling the user to inflict mortal wounds on an angel when normally that wouldn't be possible. I immediately willed it to appear on my hand, and a picosecond later, it did. I tested the blade's weight. By swinging and twirling it around, I smiled. The blade felt perfect, as if it was made for me. The craftsman taking into account my arm measurements and body movements. Looking at it closer, the blade glowed red and was very similar in design to Alucard's from Castlevania. Simple adornments and make. Just how I like it. But there was more. I placed the blade on my lap and delved deep into its inner components with my energy sense. A few minutes later, I opened my eyes and smiled. I finally had a weapon fit for an avatar. Apart from its main ability to hurt anyone, not just angels, by severing the link they had with their own personal energies, therefore leaving them unprotected, there was one more ability. I could use the sword as a focal point to channel my bending faster and easier. I would have to be careful not to use it as a clutch, but all in all the blade was awesome. MMH, I wonder what I should name it? Chapter 115, Mastery, General POV. In Olympus, a garden that had spirits flitting about, otherworldly flowers and plants, was a massive man with long flowing hair, a toga and a handsome face standing on top of a balcony in his palace. The palace overlooked the aforementioned garden, which belonged to his wife. A gesture of goodwill from Demeter to Hera. Back to the godly figure, a frown marred his attractive features. Zeus could feel a storm brewing, a storm that was not of his own making. All the deities associated with lightning and thunder could sense a stir in the element. None of them were able to pinpoint the correct location of where this feeling came from, however, and it baffled every single one of them. Elemental dimension, there was a white ball of energy made up of lightning. Random streaks of current ran along its form every few seconds in a perpetual cinematic, showing that would have left viewers entranced by its majestic appearance. The ball floated in space above the charred remains of a once great mountain, and above the sphere of energy were massive clouds, roiling restlessly. Lightning bolts fell down on the sphere repeatedly, attracted by something, or rather someone enclosed in the huge energy bubble. The lightning bolts were responsible for the destruction of the mountain that Aden had been meditating upon, and they were getting more violent as time went by. 300 meters from the epicenter, which was the energy ball, the storm was still spreading, the dark clouds covering everything in an even darker hue than normal. Aden's POV. I finally found out the drawback of using Spark of Enlightenment. The element itself pushes back. The steady progression was there for a reason, and a perk like Spark of Enlightenment undercut that to a shorter time margin, but it massively increased the strain and pushback of the element itself. That pushback culminated in a sort of test to see if I was, in a sense, worthy. I had to face the lightning and remain staunch, remain standing, in defiance while the world broke down around me. The ball of energy surrounding my form was a bubble shield until I felt ready. A shield that was dangerously getting close to being overwhelmed. I could easily unravel the storm above head by virtue of being the master of this realm, but I had a feeling that that would set me back massively. I sighed. I should have known that nothing from the system ever comes without strings attached. The system is all about self-sufficiency. That means I had to work for every single thing. I took a deep breath and opened my eyes. There was no use in hiding. That wasn't how I wanted to end this. With a thought, the lightning ball, an idea I had gotten from Azula in a certain instant from the comics, unraveled. Its structure turned into uncontrolled streams of lightning that disappeared into the air with a static sound, revealing my body to the harsh realities of nature. The storm brewing overhead looked like a monster that was now eager to come at me with everything it had and devour my soul. The dynamic was laughable. I was left standing on a small lightning platform, construct while staring above at the huge obstacle I had to overcome. Like a sailor in a small sailboat about to face the wrath of the sea. Bring it on, I calmly said, pushing a text box to the corner of my vision. As if provoked by my words, the clouds grew even more ominous. The streaks of lightning flashing in inky darkness grew more numerous, and without warning, pandemonium begun. The flash of that first lightning bolt will forever be seared deep into my memories. The lightning made contact with my chest and I held it in, with no apparent strain, using it to coat my body with a net of electric energy that fed my physique, enhancing it. My form started flashing with an aura of bluish color. My hair stood up in random waves, and the world slowed down. In this form, everything I had was enhanced to twice the effect. Strength, speed, durability, and reaction speed. I hadn't tested anything out, but that was the conclusion I had come to based on the power I could feel flowing inside me. After leaving here, I had a lot of tests to do. Tests to figure out my capability and to seamlessly incorporate this new skill into my fighting style. The clouds above felt insulted by my continued refusal to lay down and die, and in an instant, the next wave of altercation begun. Dozens of lightning streaks fell upon me like judgment from Thor. I spread out my legs on the construct I was standing on. Full mastery had ensured that I could even take the sub-skill further than they had shown in canon. Though to be fair, lightning constructs were much harder to sustain as compared to air. Lightning wanted to run around, to streak and destroy and jump and escape. It was unlike anything I had ever dealt with before. The streaks fell onto my body, and I guided them along my chi pathways, not trying to exert control over them because the energy would buck around like an excited ox and fry me from the inside. My eyes were closed while random flashes occurred around me. The power of over a dozen lightning bolts was melded with my own inner fire. My own inner energy adding more to the element than had come from the outside, and when I was ready, my hand shot out, 2 fingers extended to the sky. I let go of the power through my appendages. In an excited motion, excited to be released, that is, the lightning exploded out in one huge streak that shocked me. The streak of energy was like a beam of destruction. All the clouds were pushed far away, exposing the smog-filled sky and shining a light down onto the grounds. The sound was deafening as the attack kept on wreaking havoc in the clouds. I had redirected it. The lightning. I clenched my fist in jubilation and winced in seconds. The 2 fingers on my hand were burnt. The skin was cracked and red, but I couldn't find anything but happiness inside me. The lightning construct under me floated down. I landed on the ground and got ready for one last test before I got to the combat test. Control. My senses spread out and telepathically connected with a random dragon, flying rings above the area I was practicing on. I relayed my orders, and a few minutes later, on the horizon, a huge dragon appeared. The orders was for it to attack me. To be honest, none of the dragons could really refuse despite having a natural instinct not to harm me. I just wanted to see how much power I needed to put into a fight with a fire-aligned creature before purchasing a firebender from the database with my training points to spar with. The dragon was huge. Not as big as the dragon patriarch who was in a whole other level. I wasn't sure I could currently take, but it was big. I took off running just as it beat its wings, opened its mouth and sprayed out a huge fire breath. The wind generated by the beat of its wings increased the intensity of the orange flames. I jumped over the attack and flipped above it. Reaching deep within myself, my inner fire responded. With the tranquility in my mind, the fire changed into something else. Blue sparks that flashed between my fingers appeared. Okay, keep it low, I told myself, touching the scaly back of the dragon. It stiffened and seized up, flashes of blue electric energy stunning it and locking up its movements. I landed on the other side and sighed. This isn't going to work. The dragon was passed out from one move. Its huge size having played a huge disadvantage for it due to my agility and speed, but still, one touch and it was down. I had wanted to get a bit better with increasing and decreasing the voltage of my lightning before buying a training partner, wary that one strike would reduce them to ash. The move that had stunned the dragon was the least powerful I could make the lightning. A human being wouldn't be merely stunned. Their hearts would probably go into cardiac arrest and die. Guess I don't have a choice. I just hope that whoever I buy next has the skill to stay alive from a full-powered assault. I wanted a real fight after sitting on my ass for 3 days. I maximized the display box from the corner of my vision and instantly was bombarded by a priority alert. The text box was flashing red. Secondary directive complete. Re-establishing link with rogue unit. Incoming transmission. Accept? Looking at the timestamp, this alert had come in almost an hour ago. It was from the elemental dimension's nascent budding consciousness, something I had never received before. Then again, the dimension was connected to me in every way possible, and according to the system, it was my embassy grounds. So it wasn't completely out of left field. What was surprising, however, was the message. I clicked on the first part, trying to understand more. A whole line of text appeared that shocked me to my core. Link re-established with rogue unit. Designation changed to terror. A new being actualized by the combination of 2 souls, one Tommy Terror and a part of the essence of the Father Box, still connected to one Lex Luthor through unknown means. Taking advantage of the new functions brought by the minor text production, repair, and hive mind subroutines, the realm was able to re-establish the link between the core of the world and the essence of the Father Box. Terror is no longer bound to Lex Luthor. Further commands await to be relayed. Mind blown. I didn't want to think on the implications of this new information. All I could think of was that Lex and the light had been busy. And just like that, Canon was kicked out of the window. On the other hand, this new info would be advantageous to me in the long run. I had a mole in the light. It was just a matter of time before we crashed, and based on the numerous resources they had, I needed every advantage I could get my hands on. I clicked on the second text box. An incoming transmission from Terror. Suddenly, I found myself looking out through the eyes of someone else. I had no control and was instead more of an observer. My real body's eyes widened upon understanding what I was seeing. Seems like Terror was embroiled in a fight. A fight with Superboy 2.0.